Sahana vavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahavidyan karavavahai, tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Chaitanyam sarvagam sarvam sarvabhutaguhashayam yat sarva vishayatitam tasmai sarvavide namaha. Very good. Welcome back. We begin chapter 9 of the Upadesha Sahasri, and I think if you feel the same as I do, the more we go on, it's just an amazing text. Before we begin chapter 9, there are a couple of questions we'll answer quite briefly. Last week, I think I mentioned that why do you wake up in the morning? From the standpoint of the doctrine of karma, it's your karma to wake up. Prarabdha karma, the need to fructify more karmas makes you wake up. So the follow-up question is, why do enlightened people wake up? Aren't they beyond karma? Well, if they were beyond karma, they would be dead, right? Karma is what keeps the body and mind going until the end of our lives. So as we've discussed many times, the enlightened ones continue to have prarabdha karmas, the karmas that are responsible for this particular life, but the enlightened ones are freed from other kinds of karma that cause rebirth. The second and last question, I understand that I am sat-chit-ananda atma. Vedanta claims to remove one's suffering. I'm not sure if claim is the word I would use. As sat-chit-ananda, I do not suffer at all. It is my body-mind complex that suffers. Here's the first confusion. Body-mind complex is subject to pain. We very carefully have maintained the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is a sensation. Could be a physical sensation in the body, could be a mental sensation like grief, loss. Pain is a sensation. Suffering, as I've said many times, is how we respond to that pain. If we respond to that pain by saying, why me? Why is this happening to me? When will this go away? I won't be okay until this pain goes away. That is suffering, and that is what is indeed removed by Vedanta. So the question then comes, isn't Vedanta all about training the body-mind complex to transcend Maya, or to liberate from the holds of Prakriti? The body and mind will never be liberated from Prakriti. They're born of Prakriti. And Maya is what all this body, mind, and the world around us is about. Vedanta is not about, actually the deeper question here, is Vedanta about training your mind? Let's just focus on that for briefly, because there's an interesting point to be known here. Some of you are familiar with a psychological technique called positive thinking. And some people confuse positive thinking with how Vedanta works. So I am Brahman, I am Brahman, I am Brahman is positive thinking. Absolutely not. That would be a terrible confusion. Positive thinking, there's some value in it, I don't deny that, to counteract negative thinking. Positive thinking can certainly be valuable. But any kind of thinking is as strong as your mind is strong. If your positive thinking is stronger than your negative thinking, you're in good shape. If your negative thinking is stronger than your positive thinking, what can you do? That's the nature of the mind. So what I'm suggesting here is that if I am Brahman, or I am utterly unaffected by the problems of my body and mind, if that's merely positive thinking, that's only as good as your mind, and our minds are honestly not so good. Our minds are strong sometimes, and at other times our minds are not strong. So these teachings do not rely on a positive thinking. In more technical terms, that's kind of like mental conditioning. You change the way your mind works. You recondition your mind. In fact, as my guru said many times, these Vedanta teachings are a process of deconditioning the mind, removing wrong conclusions. Vedanta, and you've heard me say this before, Vedanta doesn't give you anything. Vedanta removes wrong conclusions that make you suffer. So there's no training the mind. It's a matter of removing wrong conclusions from the mind. Okay. I don't want to spend too much time on these questions because we have a challenging discussion here at the beginning of our chapter 9. First of all, the title, Sukshmata Vyapita Prakaranam. Prakaranam, the chapter on sukshmata, subtleness, and vyapita, pervasiveness. Now, these terms can be a little bit vague, so let's be clear. Sukshmata, subtleness, subtle in our definition is imperceptible. That which is not subtle is perceptible. That which is subtle is not perceptible. The difference, for example, between brain and mind. Your brain weighs 2.5 pounds. Doctors can actually go in and operate on it. Your mind weighs nothing. Imperceptible. It belongs to a different order of worldly reality. It's an imperceptible, non-physical, that's another good word for it. An imperceptible, non-physical reality is sukshma, and vyapita, pervasiveness, really refers to the absence of boundaries, absence of edges. So that word vyapita, pervasiveness, really means formlessness. So sukshmata, absence, imperceptibility, and vyapita, absence of form, formlessness. These are words that suggest the absence of attributes of Atma. And our discussion today is how to understand Atma as being nirguna, utterly free from attributes. Of course, we generally consider ourselves endowed with so many attributes, but as we come to understand all of those attributes belong to your body and mind, none of those attributes truly belong to sat-chit-ananda, Atma, your true self. There are many prakriyas. You know that word we've used before, teaching methodology? There are many prakriyas, teaching methodologies used in Vedanta to help you understand the nirguna nature of Atma. And today we're going to see a prakriya that I doubt very much any of you have seen before. It's a very, very clever and somewhat sophisticated prakriya that we're going to see in just a moment. So based on these principles of sukshmata, imperceptibility, and vyapita, formlessness, leading us to understand the quality of Atma as being nirguna, free from attributes. Okay. Sukshmata vyapite gneye, sukshmata vyapite gneye, gandhadir uttarottaram, gandhadir uttarottamam, pratyagatmavasaneshu, pratyagatma-vasaneshu purva-purva-prahanataha purva-purva-prahanataha. Shankara presumes here that you have studied a lot. So anyway, we will take our time, especially with this first verse. We'll take our time. So sukshmata and vyapita, the title of this chapter, and both of them are jneye, to be understood. How? Through this particular prakriya. And what is a prakriya? He says, gandha dehe, beginning with gandha means smell, but it's the attribute of the element earth. So gandha here actually represents earth, gandha dehe, beginning with the element earth, uttarottaram, and proceeding step by step from the element earth. Where will you go then? From the element earth to the element water to the element air, etc. Fire, sorry. And we'll see that in just a moment. So proceeding step by step, starting with the element of earth, and pratyagatma avasaneshu, until you reach the end. Avasana means end. Until you reach the end, the conclusion, which is pratyagatma, the inner self. And this process is done purva prahanataha, literally by negating the prior one. Prahana means negation. But in this context, the methodology is by comparing one to the next in terms of being subtle and in terms of being pervasive. That's the title of the chapter. So that's what we're going to do. And so Shankara presumes that you've done this before. Obviously, I think you haven't, so I'll go to the board. And we'll take quite a bit of time to show how this prakriya works. So starting with earth, the least subtle and least pervasive element, and working our way down to the sat-chit-ananda atma. A little bit like a more common prakriya. A more common prakriya is this panchakosha prakriya. And there's some similarity, right? So in a panchakosha prakriya, you start with the annamaya kosha, the external kosha, which is annamaya, made of food, and then you progressively go inwards towards the true self. So similarly, instead of starting with the annamaya kosha, here we are starting with the element earth. Okay, let me go to the board and try to explain this. If I remember right, this discussion is based to some extent on a text called Panchikarana, but it might not be in a text. It might be in the commentaries on the text. I'm not sure. It's been a long time since I've looked at that text. If you want to follow up, find the text, Panchikarana, and you might find some helpful teachings there. So we start with the element, and let me use English words. Earth, we say, is, and we're going to evaluate all these in terms of, here we'll use the Sanskrit word. Am I off? I am, thank you. Okay, so where are we? We are here. Sukshmata, I have to make sure all of this stays on the board. Yes. Ha. So sukshmata and I want room for translations. And vyapita. So sukshmata, subtleness, which I'm translating as imperceptibility, or maybe even better, non-physicality. I like maybe better. And vyapita, all-pervasiveness, which I said we can understand as formlessness. So we're going to evaluate all of these, starting with the element earth, and we're going to evaluate them in terms of these two criteria, we'll call them. So we start with earth. Earth has the least sukshmata and the least formlessness. Earth is the most gross. Earth is the most fixed in place. So that's the good place to begin. Maximum physicality, maximum form. And then we go to the next, water. Now, earth stays in one place. If you pour water on the floor, it spreads out, showing less formlessness. And I'm going to go back to this imperceptibility here. Sorry if you're taking notes. It's going to work much better. Okay, imperceptibility. Earth, and this is I believe this is in the that Panchikadanam text, and that is earth is perceptible through all 5 of your senses, right? You can see earth, hear earth if you drop it, you can taste earth, smell earth, and touch earth. So earth is available to all 5 senses, so it has maximum perceptibility. Compared to water, look at this. You can see water, you can, I have to get all these. So you can see water, you can hear water flowing like a waterfall, you can taste water, but water doesn't generally have a smell. If water has a smell, there's something in the water. It's not the water that smells, right? Okay, so water itself has no smell, and certainly you can touch it. So then we can subtract the perception of smell. So water is only available to 4 senses. Then we come to fire. Fire is, so earth is in one place, water spreads out, fire spreads out beyond the fire itself, right? The heat and light travels some distance, so then it is spreading out more and more. And in terms of perceptibility, you can't taste fire for obvious reasons. So I don't want to go through all 5 senses. It'll just be cumbersome. So then we'll say that we subtract the sense of taste, leaving fire available only to 3 of our senses. You can see it, you hear it crackling, and certainly you can feel it. Then we come to air. Air is yet more formless. Fire spreads out for some distance. Wind, for example, travels miles. So then air is relatively more formless. Air is relatively more imperceptible because you can touch air, but sorry, I'm a little spacey today. You can see fire, you cannot see air. So the power of sight doesn't apply. So air can only, you can feel air with the sense of touch, and what am I missing? Sight and hear. You can hear the air blowing. So you can see it, and you can hear it, and you can feel it. So we're down to 2 senses, and then we come to the last space. And remember, this is pre-scientific age where space was truly considered an element, unlike today. So we have to understand this prakriya, we have to understand it through their lens, not through our modern lens of science. So considering space to be like an element, space, of course, is no form, all pervasive. So you see the increasing vyapita, increasing formlessness. And in terms of perceptibility, you cannot feel, so you can feel wind, but again, this is ancient world, you can hear space. And they thought that sound traveled through space. We know that's not true, but that's how they considered it. So in order to use the metaphor, we use the prakriya. We have to stay with their worldview. So you can hear space, so we lose the sense of touch. So it's only available to one sense. So it is, in all of these then are increasingly imperceptible and increasingly formless. Okay, you with me so far? This is step one. Now step two, these are all sthula bhutas. Sorry. They are physical elements, sthula bhutas. Is that on the screen? Barely. Okay, I'll do the best I can. And then now we come to sukshma bhutas. And here we are dealing now with non-physical realities. A non-physical reality, as I mentioned before, the difference between brain and mind. Brain is a physical reality. Mind is a non-physical reality. Brain is sthula. Let me rewrite this so it can somewhat be seen. So these are sthula. Brain is sthula, made of all five of these elements. Mind is sukshma. It is non-physical, non-tangible. Now, we're starting at the outside, going in. All of this is more or less equivalent to the annamaya kosha, using that prakriya. But here now we come further in to the subtle elements that make us living beings. And the first we come to, the first factor that makes us living beings is, of course, prana, life force. Without prana, we would we'd be dead, simply put. And again, prana here, the difference between heart and the beating of the heart. You can have a heart that doesn't beat. You can have a heart that beats. So the beating of the heart is a non-physical factor. Prana. Blood. Blood is sthula. Circulation is sukshma. Lungs are sthula. The process of breathing is sukshma. So all of those factors collectively we call prana, the life force. Let me list these and then we'll apply this analysis. So prana is a non-physical reality that is part of who we are as individual beings. Then we have indriyas, senses. And those senses are twofold. We have organs of action and organs of knowledge. Let me use the Sanskrit terms here since they're more. So we have karma, indriyas, organs of action, like being able to grasp, walk, and talk. And we have jnanendriyas, And I'm going quickly. This I'm pretty sure you've all seen before. Jnanendriyas, organs of knowledge. Sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch are five senses. Notice the difference between eyeball and power of sight. Eyeball is part of the sthula sharira. Power of sight is the part of sukshma sharira, due to sukshma bhuta, subtle elements. So too, power of grasping. Hand is sthula, power of grasping is sukshma. So these are the indriyas, sense organs. Then we have all of our mental faculties, and I'll simply put mind. There are various mental faculties. We can divide them up in different ways. That's really not so important here, but the mind would be the next non-physical reality because of which you exist as a human being. Now, let's apply this analysis. Sukshmata, imperceptibility. So what we want to see is growing imperceptibility. That's the nature of this of this prakriya. So prana, is prana perceptible? It is, okay? So prana is fairly perceptible. How about power of sight? Now, can you see your power of sight? Not exactly, but can you tell when you need glasses or need to change your prescription? You can. So to some extent, your indriyas, your senses are perceptible, not as perceptible perhaps as prana, but to some extent perceptible. When your muscles grow weak, you perceive that weakness. How about mind? Is mind perceptible in the same way as prana and indriyas? Not at all, right? So it has no... Actually, I have to withdraw my words. There are some ways where mind is physically perceptible. How? When you're really depressed, you feel it in your body, right? Deep sadness, grief, depression can be felt in the body. So even the mind is a little bit perceptible. That's my point. So, but less so. So what we're seeing here is this process of starting with the most perceptible and proceeding towards the least perceptible. So we'll say that the mind is the least perceptible of these three. That in terms of formlessness, prana is associated with particular organs. Beating occurs here in the heart. Beating occurs here in the heart. Breathing occurs in the lungs. So it is, prana is associated with specific organs. Of course, a doctor will tell you that your circulation system goes through your whole body, but still it's confined to the circulation system, is the point here. So it is more confined, it has more form, as opposed to indriyas. Your sense of touch is all over your body. So we would say then that the sense of touch in particular is more formless than prana. And finally, coming to mind, in terms of form, this is a metaphor that's often given. Is your mind limited spatially? Now, we're so accustomed to thinking that brain is in the head, therefore mind is stuck inside the head. And we understand the logic of that, but from another way of thinking, your mind has no boundaries. Can you think about the stars? When you think about the stars, your mind reaches the stars. Those stars are billions of miles away, and in an instant, your mind can go there. How many times, for many of you raised in India, how many times does your mind go to India? If you get on a plane, you spend 20 some hours traveling to India, your mind can go there in an instant. This is a way of understanding that the mind is, relatively speaking, more formless. So here we see this progression of increasing imperceptibility and increasing formlessness and to summarize all that, increasingly free from attributes. We see a progression. As we go in further, we find fewer and fewer attributes until we reach the end of the line that says pratyagatma avasaneshu. Until you reach Atma, the true self. There we go. So Atma, being at the end of this, avasana means end. Atma being at the end of this progression is then utterly free from physicality, utterly imperceptible. And the reason Atma is utterly imperceptible is Atma is the nature of the perceiver and not part of the perceived. So you see this progression leading you to understand that Atma doesn't have any perceptible attributes. It is beyond perceptibility, beyond physicality, and further, Atma has no has no form, no edge, no boundary, no limit. Atma, which means then Atma as consciousness is certainly not stuck inside your head, as so many people wrongly believe. So this is the prakriya. I bet you haven't seen this before. It's not very commonly taught. As I said, I should have checked before class. I think there are references to this in that Panchikatana text, or it's in its commentaries. But here we have a prakriya, a way of understanding that Atma is utterly free of all these attributes. Attributes associated with the physical elements, attributes associated with the non-physical, the sukshma bhutas, the subtle elements, attributes associated with every aspect of your being as a human being. All of those attributes, there are many, they all belong to the body and mind. And when you consider sat-chit-ananda atma, pure consciousness, the consciousness which is the essence of who you are, that consciousness is utterly free from attributes. That consciousness is nirguna. So here we have the prakriya. So when Shankara wrote this verse, he presumed you'd figure all this out, right? No doubt anyone would, right? I'm being a little sarcastic. It's quite sophisticated, and it's not very commonly taught. Let's just see the verse one more time, and then we'll proceed. So he says here, sukshmata vyapite jneye. So these principles of being subtle and being pervasive can lead you to understand Atma. How? Gandha dehe uttarottaram, by proceeding step by step from earth onwards, pratyagatma avasaneshu, until you reach Atma, the inner self, consciousness, purva prahanataha. And as I said, prahana means negation, but here we're saying more subtle, more pervasive. So we lead to sat-chit-ananda atma. Okay, you made it. This is the prakriya of sukshmata and vyapita. Now we continue. Sharira prithivi tavata, Sharira prithivi tavata, yavat bahya pramanataha, yavat bahya pramanataha, abadini cha tattvani, abadini cha tattvani, tavad gneyani kritsnashaha, avad gneyani kritsnashaha. Sorry. Okay. So, shad, tavat, and yavat. We'll set that aside. Prithivi is that element earth that we talked about before. That element earth is sharira. It is present in your body. The element earth is present in your body. Is it only present in your body? Well, tavat, to the extent that it is present in the body, yavat, to that extent it is also bahya. It is present everywhere else. The element earth that's present in your body is also bahya, external, present throughout nature. Why? Pramanataha, because you perceive it everywhere in nature. So the element earth that's present in your body is the element earth that's present throughout nature. Similarly, abadini. Ap is our word for water. In a compound, it becomes abadi, referring to the other four elements: water, fire, air, and space. So first he talks about earth, and now he talks about the other four elements. So abadini, tattvani, and the tattva here means element. So, and the other four elements as well, tavat gneyani, are to be understood in the same way, kritsnashaha, completely. You should understand that not only is the element earth in your body, and therefore, the element earth that's in your body is the same element that's present throughout nature. In the same way, you should understand that the other four elements, water, fire, air, and space, that make up your physical body, they are also in and through nature. So isn't it odd, though, that when we talk about nature, we generally don't include ourselves? It's like, I am here and nature is there. Well, it's obviously untrue. Nature includes your body, not just your body, but your mind, senses, everything about this individual thing that you are invested with. All of that is part of nature. Part of nature means it belongs to nature. Isn't it odd? You wouldn't look at a tree and say, that's me. But isn't that the fact? We look at this thing and we say, it's me. Anything known to you is not you. You're the knower. Anything known by definition is not you. So anyway, like the tree. I made a note here. This verse reminded me of a famous statement by the Carl Sagan. Any of you may remember him. I think he passed away decades ago. Too early, sadly. He was a great astronomer and astrophysicist, and he made this wonderful observation. And something you may or may not know, that the early universe, after the Big Bang, the first elements to emerge were hydrogen and helium, light elements, were the only elements to emerge after the Big Bang. And those elements, hydrogen and helium, don't make up our physical bodies. Our bodies are made of heavier elements, like carbon, oxygen, etc. But carbon and oxygen were not produced. Anyway, 2 minutes of science, it's worth it. Trust me. So heavy elements like carbon and oxygen were not produced directly by the Big Bang. then how did they get produced? Well, that hydrogen I mentioned before, which was directly produced by the Big Bang, eventually clouds of hydrogen condensed and compacted until they became burning stars. Some of you know how that works. And then that burning star, if it has enough mass inside of it, as that burning star dies out, it explodes. In the explosion of that dying star, heavier elements are formed, like carbon and oxygen. So what Carl Sagan famously declared is, you are made of the remnants of exploding stars. I think the expression he used is, we are all stardust. And it's fact. Every carbon atom in your body was produced by an exploding star. And in a way, Shankaracharya refers to it. The elements in your body are the elements of nature. There's no dividing line between your body and nature. It is all anatma. Continuing. Vaivhadinam yatotpattehe Vaivhadinam yatotpattehe Purvam kam sarvagam tata Purvam kam sarvagam tata Ahameka sada sarvaha Ahameka sada sarvash Janmatra sarvago dvayaha Janmatra sarvago dvayaha. Utpat yatha, start at the end of the first line. Yatha utpattehe purvam. Yatha, just as purvam, before, utpattehe, before the origin of the universe, before creation. Before the creation of what? Vayu adinam, of the elements. Before creation of the elements, beginning with vayu, air. So let me go back to the board, make sure we're on track here. Oh, actually, some interesting thing I can share with you, and that is this order that we just went through is an order of analysis, and if I remember right, in that sorry, I'm struggling a little today. In that Panchikaranam text that I mentioned before, this becomes the subject matter for a particular form of meditation. You start by meditating on the most gross, and you successively meditate on things more and more subtle until you come to Atma, and that order is called, I need a little more room here, it is called Laya Krama. Laya Krama, Laya means dissolution. And you kind of, in meditation, you dissolve the element earth into water. In meditation, you dissolve the element water into fire, and so forth. You resolve, resolve is a good word. You resolve one into the other. That laya, dissolution, has that sense. So you resolve one into the other until finally you come to Atma. That's called Laya Krama, and that's what's taught, one of the main topics, I think, in that Panchikarana text. But here, we've got something else going on, and that is something called Srishti Krama. Am I off screen again? Just barely, thank you. Just move it over a little bit. Srishti krama. Oops. Srishti krama means the order of creation. So when the universe was created, now this is according to the Vedic cosmology, not according to science. So in Vedic cosmology, what existed first, call it Atma, call it Brahman, the same ultimate reality. And then from Brahman, successively, the world took form. And what's taught in some texts is that it followed this process of it becoming increasingly gross, increasingly perceptible, increasingly formful. Is that a word? I don't think so. And that order is then called Srishti Krama. So for meditation, we start with earth and end up at Atma. And if you want to describe, if your topic is cosmology, the origin of the universe, you start with Atma and work your way up to earth, which is the most gross, so we call that Srishti Krama. Now the reason for sharing this with you is in this verse, he says, beginning with air. Oh, good. We have another color here. So he is specifically starting here. He says, creation beginning with air. So it's from this point upwards is his reference in his verse. I just wanted you to see this so that it's more meaningful. Notice that the dividing line is between air and space. That's significant in this verse. Let me come back. Where are we? Here. Okay. So he says, yatha, just as, purvam utpattehe, before the creation, vaivadinam, vayu, etc. Vayu, etc. specifically means, come back. There we go. So vayu, etc. specifically means, vayu is air, etc. means including fire, water, and earth. So before the creation of air, fire, water, and earth, before they were created, he says, come, space, the next element, the fifth of the elements, sarvagam tata. Space was already all-pervasive before the origin of the other four elements. Just one more time. Look at the sequence. Space existed before, and this is the Srishti Krama. Space existed prior to air, fire, water, and earth, and that space that existed before those four was all-pervasive. All-pervasive space existed before the creation of the other four elements. This is a metaphor. He says, in the same way, and I'll just give you the metaphor, in the same way, Atma, if I come back to the chart. So just as space, let me show you. So just as space existed prior to the existence of these four, in the same, and that space was all-pervasive, just as all-pervasive space existed prior to these four, in the same way, all-pervasive Atma existed prior to all of this. So this is, he's really working hard with this prakriya, this methodology. So once again, just as all-pervasive space existed prior to the creation of the other four elements, in the same way, all-pervasive Atma existed prior to the creation of everything in the cosmos. Okay. Now, where am I here? There we go. All right. Now the discussion changes form. So Shankara gives this metaphor, but then Shankara continues, aham ekaha. This aham is a pronoun I. This is not Shankaracharya talking to us. We've seen that before. Remember last chapter was a dialogue between Atma and mind? That aham. This aham is Atma. Imagining that Atma can speak, as Atma had that dialogue with the mind in the prior chapter. Here, Atma says, in quotation marks, Atma says, aham ekaha, I am one, sada sarvaha, and I am eternal, sada, and I am sarvashaha, I am everything. I am ch9, pure, I'll explain some of this. I am ch9, pure consciousness. I am sarvagaha, all-pervasive, and I am advaita, non-dual. How can Shankara say all of that in this context? Of course, all of this has been thoroughly established elsewhere. But how does Shankara include it in this context? Let's go back to the board one more time. And taking this srishti krama now, which means at the beginning of creation, what existed was Atma and Atma alone. This is said in many Vedic texts in various ways. Before, you know the logic we've talked about before. Something can't come from nothing. The universe is a something. The universe cannot come from a nothing. So, whatever it was from which the universe came forth, that we call Atma or Brahman, depending on the context. Then, since Atma was in some texts will use some poetry. Let me get back here. So poetic ways of describing that, like saying Atma is the primordial seed. They use language like that. The primordial seed for the universe. And the metaphor means just as a plant grows from a seed, the universe came forth from that primordial origin, Atma, which means that before the universe, aham ekaha, I am, this is Atma speaking, I am that one who is sada, eternal, the one who existed before the universe, and the one who is sarvashaha, the one who is literally in all manners, the one who is everywhere, so that seed evolves into the plant, Atma evolves into the universe. Everything is to use common language, everything is a manifestation of that Atma, of that Brahman, of that so-called primordial seed. Just as the plant is a manifestation of the seed, the entire cosmos is a manifestation of that Atma. That's what it means, sarvashaha, all. And that Atma is ch9, pure consciousness. And something that we've discussed very, very often, that consciousness is sarvagaha. The metaphor, just as space is all-pervasive, in the same way consciousness is all-pervasive, and that consciousness is advaita, non-dual. You know, we could spend a week talking about that word advaita here. We're not going to. It's a little bit out of context. I think Shankara, notice that it's the last word in the verse. I think Shankara just put it in there to fill the verse. It's not part of the prakriya that we're discussing here. So Advaya means non-dual. Maybe a simple way of understanding it is before creation, Atma alone existed. We'll take it in that simple way. Atma and Atma alone existed. That Atma was Advaya. Okay. Yeah, we'll see one more verse, just to ground us a little bit more in our experiential reality. And we're having some problems with the software. What happened here? That's interesting. That, by the way, that word interesting, when you're visiting your doctor is looking at your report, and the doctor says, "Oh, that's interesting." Interesting is not what you want to hear when the doctor is looking at a report. So let me see if I can recover this. So this is an interesting software problem, and I haven't seen it before. Okay, here we go. Brahmadya stavarantaye, Brahmadya stavarantaye, pranino mama puh smritaha, pranino mama puh smritaha, kama krodhadayo dosha, kama krodhadayo dosha, jaye ranme kuton yataha, jaye ranme kuton yataha. You know, we've come almost to the end of the class, and it's going to take quite a while to explain this verse. So I think we'll just conclude our class just a little bit early today. And when we meet next time, we will continue with this chapter 9. Okay. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amritangamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om tat sat.